All right, my name is Chad Simpson from New Philadelphia, Ohio. I started a company about 22 years ago, grew it from a 2-stall garage with myself and just a couple others into about 80 of us now that work at the company. We've been acquiring some local companies that we've become friends with and have trusted us to take care of their customers and carry their legacy on. So we are really big on measureQuick right now. It's supporting our growth. It's supporting the technicians that we're bringing from outside the industry into our industry. It's giving them the tech side that they're looking for. It's turning our industry from the hard-working, dirty, bib overall wearing industry into a clean industry, into a white-collared industry, which makes it easy for us to recruit technicians from, let's say, the copier repair industry, which has always been a little bit cleaner, but the ability was so much different. So what I've found with measureQuick, it helps bridge that gap. They know how to have the conversation with the technician or with the customer. They know how to use basic hand tools. They know how to use electrical meters and read them. But it was such a challenge in previous years to convert somebody. It took so long to bring somebody from outside of our industry. So for me, that's really supported our growth in the past several months and just is going to encourage our growth that we plan to have this year.
Started the podcast in 2017. And people were asking me about how to start their own business. So I purchased a company in 2018 and rebranded it and basically started it completely over with that company in 2020. And we've been growing great. We have 14 employees across the company. And really, with the podcast, I have the ability to try out all kinds of products. And a lot of products are given to me for free. Sometimes I can buy them at cost. But measureQuick's one of those products that I'll pay full price for it. If they were to charge $1,000, I'd pay it because I definitely believe in measureQuick. We use measureQuick in all of our businesses, and it's the only thing that, when done consistently, it's the process that's keeps us very organized, no matter how spread out we get. And when we don't do it, we don't use measureQuick properly, is whenever we start having failures.
Tersh, Chad, great to meet you guys in person.
Yeah, good to meet you.
And you guys do your business a little bit differently than a lot of techs out there.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. And so it seems like you're taking on a lot of unnecessary complexity. So why do you do that? Why do you pile on all these layers into your business? What problems are you solving?
Consistency. I think that's going to be the biggest one for me. Being able to have remote staff. Our business model is very different. We have no physical office for all of our employees. Everybody's remote, including our office staff. And the only way that I can measure consistent performance across the board is by using programs like measureQuick. In a forms mentality, every single service call, I need it to be consistent. I don't have the ability necessarily to go do a lot of callbacks or not necessarily a happy call, but just doing check backs on calls because they might be an hour and a half, 2 hours away because we have one technician in that area. Mm-hmm. And so we need to make sure that we have consistency. And if someone does call into the office and like a customer or client, I can quickly look on that form and look at the measureQuick data and say, oh yeah, your head pressure was really high. You have all of those measurements to go off of without having to physically go out into the field and check everything just when a customer calls in.
Yeah. For us, it's scalability, quality control as we scale. Startup, to go back a year later and realize that a unit's out of refrigerant when we trusted our technician or installation technician was doing the right thing every single time.
I think that one of the things about that is I have gone back and the system would be flat, and immediately my response was, there's no way you pulled this to 500 microns. Yeah. You did no decay test on this.
And but what did they say? Yeah, we did.
So I look at the paperwork or I look at their file, and they did do it. And then we do a pressure check on it and see a cap tube popped out.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's okay.
Yeah, there's that. But until you go out to that job and physically put your eyes on it. But what I like the thought of is I can get in Service Titan and I can see what micron they opened the valves up. So if we can see that it pulled down to 500 maybe, and then it raised up to 1,500, then they pulled it down to 500, it raised up to 2,000, they pulled it down to 500. Like, it tells me there was a leak most likely. Could have been moisture, but probably was a leak they couldn't find, and it was Friday, and they're like, shit, nobody will figure this out. It'll rear its head, and it'll rear its head when it's 95 degrees, and it's going to be the next year when we need to be out servicing customers that are opportunities for us. We're going back to do a full darn startup, search for the leak when they should have done it while they were there. So for us, it's that, like I say, we can't scale without it. And it's just a quality control measure. There was a time where I did every single startup personally, and we had 0 callbacks.
Yeah.
Because it took a lot of time to do it.
But then you weren't running your business.
I wasn't running a business. I couldn't grow the business. So when I decided, look, I'm going to grow this business, we're going to bring in great talent, and it's just going to run itself. It's going to be fantastic. What I realized is, like, our industry is short of great talent. Our industry is short of numbers, of any talent, of people in general, right? So what we have to do is bring people from outside of our industry. And I mentioned, like, copy repair technicians are fantastic. They've got a great soft skill. They understand how to dispatch a call. They understand how to use tools. They understand how important a process is. They just don't know our industry. So with measureQuick, if we can teach them the process and the sequence, they can very quickly become efficient service and installation technicians, but it can't be done without measureQuick. I've never found anything like it.
Cool.
Ditto.
And so on the topic of like junior technicians, is this something that you do too? Do you hire junior or non-technicians to be able to integrate into your company?
From outside the industry. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
That's it. It's a very delicate balance. You just have to. We do personality tests to start with.
Interesting.
And
Probably a background check too first.
yeah, of course you do that. But then to ensure that they're mechanically inclined, we have to obviously do other testing as well. But once we get into that, like, we know that they're mechanically inclined. We know that they have a great personality to match our culture and our customer base that we expect. Then we use a combination of measureQuick and Interplay Learning. Interplay Learning, we do a lot of training on that platform. Whereas when we are doing ride-alongs, or if they're doing ride-alongs and they got to the point to where they are comfortable enough to be in the field and consistent, measureQuick helps us to ensure the consistency, like you said, to scale, to the ability to be able to scale the business. Otherwise, it would be I wouldn't be able to say with confidence that we are the best, because at that point you're guessing. Yes, this technician is the best, but technician B, maybe not be the best. Yeah. And so with it, you can create a very consistent business. And I think that's where we struggle. I heard you talking before about hiring technicians who have 20 years of experience. And for me, every time I hire someone who has 20 years of experience, it's like I spend 3 years untraining 20 years of bad experience.
Yeah,
and
100%.
With measureQuick, it takes a lot of the BS out of the situation. Like, you can't sell your way into, yes, I did this properly, because measureQuick just shows that you did or didn't do it the right way. That's what I like about it. I love when Jim first introduced measureQuick, I was on board instantly, and I was like, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Yeah. And then more and more things come along, so much so that my technicians are telling me about things that get introduced in an update, and I'm like, oh heck, I didn't know that was available. And
that's awesome.
So
but still is creating value for your company. You don't have to know, because you trust that it's going to be the right information.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. Between the customer, the technicians, they have a question about things. The first thing that I ask is, what's measureQuick information? Let me see that data. And 9 times out of 10, I don't get that phone call back, because they hadn't finished putting in the data into measureQuick. As soon as they put it into measureQuick, then it's okay. And then I've found the guys that try and cheat the system too, where they like clear out the codes. And then, but there's other things to show this still isn't right. You have the little green box on your refrigerant gauges or whatever, and it's like it's way outside of that, but you have a green checkerboard. I'm like, okay, so you just cleared that out and took a screenshot and sent it to me. And so let's get the real numbers. And the more you use it, the quicker it is. I know that for a technician who has been doing it for 20 years and they see a bad capacitor, it's so easy to just swap the capacitor out and roll, maybe glance at the condenser coil, maybe not even put your gauges on it, just go to the next call. But for us, one of our core values is wow service, and
I believe WOW service is providing everything that you said you would. Whenever the dispatcher or the CSR has spoken with the client, they told that client, we're going to diagnose your entire system. They didn't say we're just going to diagnose the capacitor.
Yeah.
And so part of diagnosing the entire system is measuring the airflow. We're going to measure the static pressure. We're going to inspect the ductwork, inspect the indoor unit. You can't do all of that. You can't see the realistic, real-time SEER rating of the equipment if you just swap out a capacitor and go. We have so many spec homes in our area throwing those things up like wildfire, like 2,500 a month it feels. And those houses are just flex duct, triangle box, more flex duct, and nothing's been balanced. They wrote it on a spreadsheet and said this house should use this amount, and they have no idea. And the commissioning on those jobs is maybe pull it down to 500 microns, maybe not, and just blow the charge and go. You got cold air coming out, and let's roll to the next house. But we pull up to this house and we do a full inspection on the system. We know that the static pressure is through the roof, and they keep complaining because it's under warranty, but we've had to change out 3 ECM motors in the first year or 2 years of it being in commission. And once we pull up there, and before we even tell them, you have a bad whatever, or they said, by the way, we've had to replace these other parts. We can see that because the static pressure is through the roof. We really need to make some duct modifications.
Don't treat the symptoms, treat the actual problem.
Exactly. And diagnosing the entire system is one of our, that goes back to our core value of WOW service. We can't stand out if we do the exact same thing everybody else does. The only way that we can stand out from the crowd is to do business differently. And that's why I dress the way I dress. That's why we show up in khaki pants and a polo shirt. It's because that's not normal, so we're going to do the exact opposite. And it's not normal to diagnose the full system. It's not normal to be there for 2 hours, 2.5 hours on a diagnosis. If you can tell our customers when they move somewhere where it's not in our service area and we get a phone call back that, will you change your service area and come to this service area? Because nobody spends the time with us like you do. Now, is that profitable? That's the fine line there, because that's me. I'm business focused. And how do you make that profitable? What's the ROI on a happy customer? Referrals, and referrals are everything. So you really have to take that into consideration when you're talking to somebody.
Do you track your referrals like fairly well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As much as possible. Obviously, you ask someone and they say, oh, yeah, I heard from Google, or I found you on Google, when in reality they had been talking to neighbors and they all recommend us. But yeah, this is definitely one of the first questions whenever we're collecting information for a new client. But it's I don't remember where my train of thought was going.
Profitability. Can you spend 2 hours on a call when you could have done it in 10 minutes with a capacitor? Is it profitable to use measureQuick when you knew the capacitor was bad? You could have been out to do 8 more calls that day.
What do we find when we actually use measureQuick? We find that we have a high static pressure issue. Literally, I went to a call 2 weeks. No, actually, it was right after I seen you last. I flew back home from Tucson on a Saturday. And on Sunday, I went to a call where the client, they were to the point to where they were ready for us to get rid of the system. Like, they wanted their $14,000 back.
Was this a system you had put in?
We had put in.
Okay, good, great story. Keep going with that.
$14,000. We put this in. It was not commissioned properly. This is when we were running and gunning and bringing on new people. Our onboarding process was not up to par. The checks and balances weren't there. When you grow fast, you find problems, and that's what we've done. And
we have to.
Part of the problems are, like, when you find a problem, you have to own up to it. And so I went there with them wanting $14,000 back and to take the system out. And I left there with a $1,000 check because I communicated with them. I showed them that it was a static pressure issue. We actually had an undersized return, and that should have been caught on the sales call aspect of it. We dropped the ball several times in here, but it was very simple. Hooking up all the probes. I used the job link probes. Makes it very simple to use. And I showed them, I pulled the filter out and I said, look, this is your head. It keeps locking out on high head pressure. It tripped on high head pressure 3 times because the filter got dirty. Now, we had been out there 3 times. Every time it was a dirty air filter. And every single time. So then, like, I go in there mentally thinking, this is going to be a nuisance call. They just didn't change their air filter. I get there and it's a clean filter. Perfect. Like, they had just changed it out yesterday.
Yeah.
And it was locked down high head pressure. I was like, yeah, no brainer. It was a dirty air filter that caused this thing to lock up. So I put my gauges on it. I run everything, but my head pressure's in the 500s with a clean. It was a MERV 11 filter. It was a good pleated filter, but it was in the 500s when measureQuick had that little green box and said it should be like 325 or something like that. Yeah. And I pulled with them, I showed them, I was like, look, this is what I'm seeing so far, real-time data. And they're like, first off, they're amazed with all the information that we could gather via Bluetooth. Yeah. And I said, okay, this green box here, that's where our pressure should be, but this is where we're actually. And at 600, it's going to lock out again, or it's going to trip, and then if it does it 3 times, it's going to lock the system out. And we were at like 525 or something like that. And I said, so a slightly dirty air filter is going to cause that head pressure to go right back up some more. And I pulled the filter out and it dropped down to 400 on the head pressure side. And I was like, oh yeah, let me investigate this even more. So then I find out that it needed a 20-inch return and we had a 16-inch return on it. Yeah. And I was like, man, I cannot believe this made it through a salesperson, a service technician before the salesperson, the technician installing the system and commissioning it. Like, it made it through all of those people. And then I come out here, and 2 other times we've gone out there for what we considered a nuisance call. Yeah. That showed me whenever we were busy, when we were understaffed because we were growing and we let the process fail, like when we let the process slide by because we were so busy, fails every time. Yeah. Not following the process. Yeah. And it just reiterates the fact that we must follow the process, because if the first technician had done that, they would have known, yeah, we have a busted evap coil on, your system's 15 years old, has R22. I remember this. But the pressure is high on this evap coil because the return is undersized during the wintertime. And if we had caught it then, we could have made those modifications during the installation of the new system. We could have had a happy, raving customer from the get-go. Yeah. But instead, we had a customer who almost had us pull the system out. Yeah. And give them $14,000 back, which is not fun, and ruin a reputation because they were a referral from a happy customer. So they go back to the happy customer that referred us. That customer is no longer going to refer us anymore. Yeah. So it's just a huge chain of events that, if we had followed the process, would not have been a big deal. Yeah. Not to mention all the lost revenue of every time we go on those warranty calls that we could have been going somewhere else. Yeah. So we hurt ourselves, making ourselves more busy.
And how many people have they told that they can't go back and call, like, all the 10 people at work that they said, like, why'd you take off work? Well, I got to go meet my HVAC contractor because he messed this up. They're not going to call those people back and make that right.
It's there.
In their mind, we're not calling them because Joe had problems with them, right?
Exactly right.
So even though you fixed it now, it's too late. Referrals are gone from that customer.
100%. 100%.
I mean, I've got so much to add on to what you're saying. It's so awesome.
But just not following the process of measureQuick. So like, I could tell you all the great things we do about measureQuick, but the fact that when we didn't use measureQuick, we completely failed. And the individuals who were involved with this entire project, every single one of them, I'm trying to think, every one of them have at least 15 years experience.
It's the stuff that's missed. And I think it's only going to get harder for us as the leader or the owner of the company as airflows increase higher on the heating side than the cooling side for really the first time ever, I believe. Yeah. We're replacing systems that we put in 20 years ago that I probably didn't do a great duct design 20 years ago, but I got away with it. New home that we might have done, we're back to replace the furnace. We put it in and it all of a sudden doesn't work. And I'm like, well, I put the duct system in. It's worked for 20 years. It's got to work. It's 25 feet of flex duct in the attic that worked fine before on a 90% single stage furnace from 20 years ago. It worked fine. Like, how? it's impossible. It worked. It's got to work. Something else. It's a piece of equipment.
Yeah.
Change the piece of equipment out. Something's wrong with it. What we realized once we start using measureQuick is it's not the equipment, it's the ductwork. Yep. And it's stuff that we put in. Should be right. Should work perfect. Just put it in and don't even worry about checking anything. It's going to work fine. Right. We find that we're creating our own problems.
The thing that blows my mind with the new equipment, and we start selling 20 SEER anything, 23 SEER stuff, 20 whatever, SEER, heck, 16 SEER stuff, and you're putting it on 11, 12, 13 SEER ductwork that wasn't amazing to start with. And you start commissioning this, and then all of a sudden you see the SEER rating, the real SEER rating of the new system, and you're like, oh crap, do I go back to them and tell them that 20 SEER system is actually 14 SEER?
It's a thing. So I'll kind of let you know where my thought is on this, the TrueFlow grid. So my thought is if we can send out, and we're trying this right now, and everything I talk about, I don't want anybody to think, oh man, Chad's got this figured out. He's got a perfect company and everything flows smoothly. Look, we got struggles, man. Like we're struggling every day to get better at what we do. But if we don't try to get better using measureQuick or TrueFlow grid, then we might as well just close the doors because that's where we're headed. But what we're doing, and this is a recommendation from Jim Bergman, was why don't you send your comfort advisors out with the TrueFlow grid? It's not as, you don't have to have all the background and the commissioning of measureQuick, but just simply stick it in. Because what I shared with him a couple of struggles lately is we're selling $1,000 system on a duct system that's 30 years old that in theory should work. We're looking at it like, yeah, I mean, there's a 6-inch run, 6-inch run. So yeah, this is perfectly fine. Flex here, but it doesn't. So what we end up doing is we just charge this customer $18,000 for a system. All we did was put a couple boxes in the basement on, and we did half of a system. So we feel so bad about it. We end up going back sometimes for free, or just saying, okay, just pay us cost. We could do this for $1,000. It would have been an opportunity up front to be a $25,000 or a $30,000 system. But what we're finding is like, we're just feeling so bad because we didn't do our job correctly. We're going back and spending 3 days to lose $5,000 in revenue that we could have been there to put a furnace in the next day, or furnace in the next day.
You won't be in business very long.
No, absolutely not. And I think that any company that's not using TrueFlow or measureQuick in any combination they're missing the boat. It's not scalable. They won't be able to grow. Actually, we'll see a decline. They're probably not,
because that's what you experienced.
Oh, as well, yeah, exactly what we experienced. We're watching Google reviews, and it's just a means to an end. It's going to be a long, slow death.
I believe if your competition's using it and you're not, that's the end of you. You may be in an area, a small town area where nobody's using it, and that's how you've gotten away with it so far.
Yeah.
But once the competition starts using it and word gets out, it's
inevitable. Somebody's going to start using it.
Yeah. And if it's anybody that's in our area, they listen to either my show or anything else, or the podcast, that they hear us talk about it. And
I love what you do for that reason, and I think we're very much like-minded. We invite our competition in to see what we do. There's and I say competition like we're enemies, but this competition has become close friends of ours. We vacation with some of our competitors because we just are so like-minded. But what I realized, if you could give them the whole playbook, this is how I run my company. Here's the book, run yours the same. Majority of people won't, because they're so busy, they go back to their day-to-day, and they've done it so long, they know more than I know and all that good stuff. But the ones that will come and visit our learning lab, and we don't make money doing this. It costs us money every time we turn the lights on. We've never made a penny at this learning lab. But I think what we do is, if our competitors know what we're doing, they're not going to talk shit behind our back.
Yeah.
And say they're just making stuff up as they go. If they know what we're inspecting and how we're inspecting, and I can get their technicians using the same tools that we're using, and once they realize I'm not trying to recruit their technicians, because I quite frankly don't want, brings the industry up. And it actually helps us in the end, because people will say, oh yeah, Simpson was here. Yeah, they're trustworthy. They probably should take their word of advice. It's a neat feeling when your competitors will talk like that about you.
To really change habits. Like if somebody has those deeply ingrained habits of either running their business a certain way or doing calls a certain way, there's always going to be so much friction if you confront them head on. There's no incentive for them to accept what it is that you're trying to tell them.
Yeah.
And so I love that, bringing them in, planting the seeds, being like, I'm not pushing anything on you.
Yeah.
I'm really excited that I'm doing it this way. It's working really well for me.
Yeah.
And like, I see you as being someone who also needs to help the people in our area that need help, and do with it what you will. And then after a while, it just starts percolating. They see you succeeding, and they're just like, crap.
They see it before the invite. So it's funny, like I don't target people like, hey, let's go to the shop today and see if they'll come join our training, because they wouldn't, right? But when they start seeing that we're doing things a little bit differently, and our trucks look a little bit differently, and our office is a little bit different, and the technicians that we recruit are different than any technicians they've ever seen, what are they doing? How are they doing it? I don't have to ask them if they want to join. They'll just casually like say, hey, I heard you have a training facility.
How you do that?
Yeah, what are you doing? Like, we've got one competitor. It's a great competition. They're larger than we are, actually. But they said, we've got a training lab. You know what it is? I'm like, what? He goes, we have a cart that literally has a couple relays and sequencers, and that's our training facility. I'm like, really? He's, yeah, I'd love to see what you're doing. All right, cool. Come on down. Now there's the invite. Well, they'll see what you do, and they know you're doing things differently, and they know you're doing it right, and they want to be part of it. And as long as they'll nudge their way in or ask about it, and then if we openly invite them, then it just opens the doors to a great relationship.
So what's the starting point for these companies that they see both of you, you've scaled your business, and you scaled your business by doing it the right way, by implementing processes, by following standards. So for companies that want to follow that same path, how do they start?
So I will tell you, not every one of our technicians use measureQuick. Now, I hope that they will in time, but every new technician does. And I had this conversation with Jim the other day. It's like, my technicians that I say, hey, go use this app. And they're like, it's clunky. I can't figure it out. I don't understand it. Well, it's not that they don't understand the app. They don't understand how to commission a furnace.
Yeah.
So they spent all these years in the field. If there's a leg broken off the table and you walk in and the table's on its side, like, it's obvious that I'm a service technician, that leg's missing. We need to put a new leg on. If a capacitor's bad, if a motor's bad, like, those are obvious problems. We pound our chest over those things, which those are the most common things, like contactor's bad, blower motor's bad. What we miss is that airflow side. And you just can't teach that any other way.
Not only that, how much of the problems that we are diagnosing are a result of the lack of airflow, other things that we don't understand. Like, it's so
the primary
often,
job of the system is to move air.
We have a compressor failure, and we just change out the compressor and assume that it was a mechanical failure.
Because we miss, as technicians or trainers or leaders of the company, we miss the training. Like, we train diagnostic of compressors because that's what we have to find.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's easy to diagnose a compressor because we can teach them how to use a meter, how to check voltage, how to check ohms, how to check amps. Oh, the compressor's bad. Replace the compressor. And we get away with it because it doesn't fail the next day. It's 2 or 3 years later, compressor's bad. Not a problem. I know how to diagnose that. I already changed this compressor. It's super easy. Yeah, it must have been a lemon. It's not the equipment. Let's face it.
Flooding back because of lack of airflow.
Yeah.
And so but whenever I tell a senior technician that, the deer in the headlight look that I've received over the years, especially several years ago, whenever the senior technician was several years my elder, and they're like, I don't think you really know what you're talking about. Like, maybe once every blue moon that's the case, but most of the times it's just lightning strikes. We have a terrible power grid. I hear people say that all the time. Our power grid's so bad that we had a power surge, and that's probably what took your compressor out.
Yeah.
I don't like that word.
It could be the case, but
it's like the equivalent of being in a tribal culture and just being like, oh no, the gods must be crazy right now. We don't actually know what happened here, but we're just going to attribute it to this, charge you some money, and
hope for the best.
Yeah, and time eases that pain that they've gone through, and they just think, oh yeah, we have had that problem before, but it's been a couple years. Like, they shouldn't replace compressors every couple years. So for me, bringing on the technicians that have no bad habits, have never used a set of gauges, really don't understand a refrigeration flow or sequence, don't really know what the components are. If we can teach them that stuff, then we can easily teach them how to commission a system. And Jim says it's just as easy as if we can just teach them how to use the probes. But I think what we miss is we need to read the manual. If we're a carrier dealer, we need to read from cover to cover the manual, because in measureQuick it says, there's a spot where it says, and I want to take a picture with a level on the vent, and I can say it's 2-inch or 3-inch, and I want to say it's properly sized vent. There's a spot, you're going to click it. Most technicians will click, yep, verified vent. But did you? Because you didn't open the manual. Because you don't even know that there's a vent table in the manual. Because I'm a service tech, I'm not an installer, I don't need to know that stuff. So what I'm realizing is, like, we got to step back. we're going to open up manuals even in our company next week, and we're going to sit down in a group and we're going to read it cover to cover on a single stage piece of carrier equipment, which is just the most basic piece of a furnace that you can commission. But what I find is like people say, what's this clock and the meter stuff all about? Because they've never read the book. These are guys, we did this a few years ago before we really grew, had our next growth. And we did it just as a practice. There was 20 of us in the company. Yeah. It was a pretty easy one. We were slow. So it made sense to me. Like, I bet these guys aren't reading. And I had a guy in the field for 20 years. And I thought he would be my grumpy one that would complain. He said to me to the side by myself, hey man, I've never read one of these before. He's like, I know there's a vent table because I've got to make sure the vents are right, but like I've never really set a furnace up before. Yeah. And he got real like deep into it. And then he started clocking meters and stuff like that. And that's before measureQuick even. Now that guy can easily catch on to measureQuick. But if all you do is force a new technician out there and hey, here it is. It's just easy stuff. It's going to make you good tech, but you don't teach them the basics behind it. That's going to be the one that fails. He's going to go back and have bad habits and learn from Joe that rides in the truck that Joe said, you don't need to know that shit. I've been doing this for 20 years. You don't need measureQuick. Joe's not a great technician either. He's a table leg replacer. Yeah. When the capacitor's bad, he can replace it, but he can't diagnose anything else. He doesn't know what the actual BTU outlet of that furnace is. He can't tell you what the CFM truly are. He can't tell you if the ductwork has problems. He can't tell you any of that stuff. He's just a parts replacer, which is most of our industry of seasoned technicians right now are just parts replacer. They get lucky, but they leave stuff overcharged.
They've learned the symptoms. Mm-hmm. They've learned how to diagnose the symptoms of the problem, but they have no idea what's the cause of those symptoms. Like they have no clue why they're changing, the why behind everything. That's my kind of go-to is always give them the why or ask for the why, especially if I see someone who's consistently changing out capacitors. Man, somebody's consistently changing out TXVs. Like, I need to dive into this because I've been in the industry for 25 years and personally I've changed out probably 3 TXVs and I have a technician that went through 10 TXVs in 6 months and I'm like, I don't know if we're diagnosing this.
Is this a warranty replacement stuff or?
No.
Okay.
No,
out of warranty.
Out of warranty stuff. And so the lack of really buying into measureQuick and truly believing that it's not a TXV issue, it was X, Y, and Z issue or whatever it was. I believe I'm right there with you. I think that there's so many people who have learned this is what I'm seeing. I've seen this same symptom 25 years. And if I changed out this part, it fixed that symptom. And that's the definition of a parts changer. And a lot of people will say that's experience, but that's not, that's one of those bad experiences that we must get rid of. And and you've done something for 20, 25 years and it's worked. And now I'm telling you that's not right. How hard is it going to be to change that mindset? That's the hardest part about having anybody. measureQuick's perfect for new technicians because, like, I tell this story all the time. When I became a service manager at a local air conditioning company, I was the head service technician when I became the service manager. The absolute worst person to make the service manager. Top revenue generator, the person that's always there every day consistently. Like, I am the best guy in the company as far as service techs go. They took me out of the field and put me into a position I had no clue what I was doing. The good part about it was I had a BDR manual sitting right there. And they handed me that manual and said, this is how you do your job.
Perfect.
And I took that manual and I read it from cover to cover. And everything that I did, I just did it that way. So during the recession, during 2007 and 2008, 2009, for 7 years, I was that manager. And we went from $1 million in the entire company to 8 during that recession. And the service department was covering the overhead of the entire company. That would have never happened if I had experience from this is how we've always done it. I just did it with fresh eyes on just opening this manual and doing it that way. So I believe that technicians who just don't know any other way of doing it, that's how they learn to do it, and that's how they do it.
The trend in both your stories is like when you say that you should sit down and read something cover to cover. It sounds like a waste of time. It sounds like it's not actually.
It's a challenge, especially if you have dyslexia.
But why did you do it? You did it because you were experiencing pain.
There is a pain.
You had ended up having a trigger moment. And so to be able to teach this to others is it's not about trying to tell them, it's read something cover to cover. Just reflect back. What is it that is tiring you off your feet? What is it that's costing you so much money over and over again? That's the thing that you should find the manual for that.
Yeah.
Make sure that the activity of reading the manual is associated with a pain point, because if you don't, then
That becomes a pain point.
Nobody will see it as being valuable. Yeah.
I like to think of myself as a good leader, as a respected leader to my coworkers. And I think everybody's a coworker. I think we all are in this business together. So when I say, hey guys, let's read the manual, I explain why, like, they're on board. Like, they may think, oh man, this is going to suck. Which
You're also the boss.
It does. But I think that they respect it. I would challenge every owner to we're going into our shoulder season right now. So we're going to have some time. So I'm not a big fan of layoff. And part of our learning lab was, let's train in our shoulder season so we're really, really strong when it's go time, rather than, hey, it's our first 90-degree day. Good luck out there, guys.
Have fun.
You create enough work for next day with
Like
our
sports
callbacks.
team,
Great.
They actually have before tournaments, they actually go and practice.
Yeah. So I would challenge every owner right now to just pick out the most simple furnace you guys install and read it with the entire group. And I would suggest a page per person. Now, I'm a very slow reader, and it's embarrassing for me to read in public. And my learning is much slower. My learning comprehension is much slower than probably the average technician. But look, there's no embarrassment, and I can say it, and the guys see me fumble, and they don't feel as foolish fumbling on these manuals. And these manuals have become easier to read over the past 15 years.
I think that's a challenge too. When I was first in the van in 2005-ish, that the manual was a white paper document that was written by engineers, and it's very engineer talking, and so it's okay. I'll check that out later.
Yeah. Do you remember the chronotherms of the late 90s? Did you ever read one of those manuals and try to, like, they were brutal. It like almost
torture, just
it almost made me want to quit my job and do something else. But they've become very reader friendly, and I know that because I have a low grade reading and comprehending level, and so I can relate with why people don't want to read in a group. But just do it, and I would suggest do that before you implement measureQuick, because your success rate will go up. And I told Jim about that the other day. And I think he agrees with that, is if we don't teach them how to commission a furnace off of what Carrier, for example, says to do, because, and I know I'm going in a circle here talking about the technicians that I just throw out there, hey, take it, you've been doing this for a long time, you'll figure it out. They tell me, like, dude, it takes like an extra 2 hours on every job. This sucks. I'm not going to do it. I don't need it to. Look, I replaced the capacitor in 20 minutes and moved on. What do I need to do this for? It just takes too much time. If they did it the way the manufacturer says to do it, it's basically implementing every step of measureQuick. measureQuick is just the final simple measurement at the end.
It shows you everything that you're doing. That it shows you in a pretty picture what you should be doing already.
Yeah, you should be doing it already. Absolutely.
Normally would have to explain this to the client in a roundabout way, however you can figure out how to communicate with the client. Instead, you have this pretty picture that shows you.
That's one of the hardest
with
things.
Commentary, with consistency.
And with